the ones that pushed for the playoff were really interesting to me, Garrett, because these were all teams came up just short. All of them had shots at power conference teams, and most of them fell just short. One of them, they beat their power conference opponent, but they ended up not being as good as we thought in the preseason. So this 5-pack here, we've got Army, Tulane, Navy, UNLV, and Memphis. All of them spent some time or even finished in some cases in the top 25 this year. Of course, we had the Army Navy tracker all year long where we were kind of tracking to see, hey, what if they play in the American Championship game? What if we get that 2 weeks in a row? And yeah, I mean, it was just a banner year, first of all, for the service academies. I guess we can start there. Let's talk about the service academies. A banner year for Army and Navy, one that we haven't seen since this country was at war in Europe in the 1940s. And just a really fun story to follow all year long. But I guess the question is, do they have staying power? Both being in the American Conference, can they stay at the top of the American, or is it going to be kind of volatile? Because that's kind of the nature of service academies.
Yeah, and they typically rely on like a player, right? So it really depends on, hey, is this guy still going to be on the roster? Hey, is this guy going to come back for one more year? He just showed us he had a good year. Can he do it again? And that's really just what it's going to come down to. Honestly, can't tell you if they have more eligibility for those couple of guys right now. I'm trying to look that up on the spot, but Blake Horvath for Navy was the big reason why they succeeded. I was really impressed with him. I think overall was impressed by several guys. Really thought that there were several guys that did a good job throughout, but yeah, just very impressed with Horvath and the job he was able to do. He ended up scoring 30 total touchdowns this last season, so big props to him in that regard. And I think
Horvath was a junior, I believe, so he should be back next year.
yeah, I think so. So
yeah,
he should, if he is able to come back, and if he's able to if he's able to keep that production up, then I think that he'll be just fine, and Navy will be just fine in that regard. So I'm excited to see where they go from there.
Sorry, I had myself muted there for a second. Yeah, I think, and Bryson Daly, the same thing. Obviously, he was a senior this year, so he will not be back. But that system that they have at Army, as long as they can find a guy to plug and play, they're gonna have a favorable schedule. The American, I think, when we think of the American, we kind of think about they had the branding for so long of like the Power Six, right, and how we're the conference that's going to be right there on the next level and right behind. It's not so anymore. I don't think. I don't think that they are necessarily going to be that Power Six conference, for lack of a better term. It seems like that they've kind of been passed up, maybe by the Mountain West. Certainly at the top of the Mountain West,
Yeah.
the Sun Belt is certainly deeper than the American is at this point. The top of the American is still really, really solid, and there's a lot of good teams that are going to be pushing for the playoff. But outside of that, the schedules are going to be loaded with a lot of teams like Rice, like Southern Miss, like several others that are just really struggling to make a bowl game every single year.
And it's hard too, because the Americans been really good, and the Americans had really good production, and sort of the product's been really good, but a lot has left in recent years. And I think a lot's going to continue to go. Like, so, talk Memphis for a second. Big Seth Hennigan fan over here. I think that he's an awesome quarterback. Love what he was able to do. He had a fantastic year. Leads them to beating Florida State. Obviously, that didn't turn out to be much of an accomplishment this last year, but it's good for the brand, right? You get to say that we beat Florida State. It's a big time program. You went into their house and did it. And so that's a good thing that you can put on your resume. They beat West Virginia in the Frisco Bowl, back-to-back 10-plus win seasons. Overall, like, great production there for Memphis. Seth Hennigan, not there. So I don't know that I expect Memphis to stay on top right now, right? I don't know that I would expect Memphis to stay in the same spot. They could have a great guy coming in after him. I would still expect a step backwards, just because it's really hard to live up to that in your first year starting. If it's, transferring schools, if they bring in a guy in a transfer portal or something like that, whatever it turns out to be, it's really hard to fill those shoes. And so that would be a place where I say I'm not necessarily expecting Memphis to stay to that standard. Tulane's another one, right? They lose their coach a couple years, and so that's tough to lose their coach. They've found a great one to replace him with. But then you look at this here, like Darian Mensah had a great year. He's leaving for Duke. Mekhi Hughes, obviously fantastic. He leaves to go to Oregon. I don't know who they're going to replace those guys with. It seems like they can kind of reload and find talent, so maybe that stays the case. But you can all, again, similar to Memphis, you can put me in the category of I don't know how they're going to replace that come next season, right? I don't know what they're going to do to replace it. And even if they get guys that are really talented, again, like, can you expect the same thing from them when these guys have been carrying that mantle for these teams?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And that's always going to be the struggle of doing well in the G5. Like we talked about off the top, your players are going to be looking for an opportunity at a bigger school. I do think some of these schools are better set up than others from an NIL perspective to maybe keep some of these guys
Sure.
or attract transfers even from the G5 level and compete with some of those guys. Let's go out west away from the American. Also, slight correction. I did say Southern Miss is in the American. They are in the Sun Belt. That's on me.
Sure.
We'll talk about the Tulsas and the Rices of the world, I guess, when we talk about the bottom of the American.
Gracious him. How about that?